It's chaos.
It's a different type of Sunday scary.
It's your newest obsession.
It's Dirty Driving, a Formula One podcast.
We're the Hornsby sisters. I'm Katie.
And I'm Megan.
Yeah. So Megan and I ended up at Trey Secchi's yesterday.
We went back to the scene of my crime. It really wasn't a crime, honestly. It was a grand old time. It was the first time I was there.
Yeah, I enjoyed it. I liked the environment. I liked the atmosphere. I was surprised at how many people were there that early. I lost a little bit of time, I will say.
Okay, we need to back it up. We need to back it up and let everyone know that all weekend, there's like a gaggle of us that go to Trey Secchi's, or going to Trey Secchi's for the second time. It wasn't like we regularly go there. And I was telling everyone that we need to be there early. Like, you need seats. Like, we have to get there early. And everyone kind of like looked at me like I was crazy when I said I'm picking you guys up at 6:35. Katie even kind of was like, okay, that's a little early in her like look to me, but she was like, I also don't want to stand, so I'm gonna just do whatever you say, but also that's a little early. And then we get there before they technically open, by the way. We were the second group there. There was a dude in a McLaren hat drinking before we walked in. That was phenomenal. And all of a sudden, people start rolling in, and Katie was like, oh, shit.
Megan was right.
We did need to be up
Which is
that
fine.
early.
I got up. My alarm went off, and I was like, all right, it's race day. It's time to go. And got ready, and Megan was actually about 10 minutes tardy on picking me up, but it's fine.
Okay, wait. I told you, I messaged you. I said I was going to be late.
Yeah, great time. Bloody Marys, shot of J-Mo. We went and got breakfast afterwards, which was needed.
The breakfast was amazing. Oh, my God. It was a great day. And honestly, isn't it just like fun to be in a space where other people are just talking? Like, you're sitting there and you're hearing people talk about it around you.
That was the best part and what I probably fell in love with so much about like going to the bar was like I could hear the whispers about, oh, Max Verstappen this, oh, Lando Norris this, oh, da 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 da, and I'm like, they know their names. Like, obviously they do because they're at a bar at 7 a.m. to watch the race, but it's like, oh my God, we've got a whole group of people who like actually know what's going on, which is so rare to have that many Formula One fans all in one space. For me, at least. I mean, like,
yeah, I mean, this is only my second time there, and well, first off, I won the driver poll, the blind driver poll. Everyone throws in $10, and then you randomly pull a driver. I got Max Verstappen.
She lucked out.
So, like, I was living large early on Saturday morning, or Sunday morning. But, I mean, it wasn't how I wanted things to go down, but I was happy that things went down when I pulled his name.
We needed that extra cash this weekend, so we'll get into that.
But I'm just saying, we'll get into that. We digress. It's nice to be in a room where maybe not everybody is like, I've been watching Formula One since like the day I came out of my chrysalis. Like, I am the greatest Formula One fan ever. Everyone's just like, oh my God, Max Verstappen. Oh my God, Charles Leclerc. Like there were so many McLaren fans. Like, there was like 3 people. At least 3 in McLaren stuff. There was a guy in a Haas shirt.
Not the Haas friend.
Not my friend.
A new Haas friend.
I mean, there was all of us and all of our like dirty driving. I rep Ferrari for the Tifosi. I was the only Ferrari fan, and wasn't the only Ferrari fan. I was the only fan in Ferrari gear, and like it was just heartbreaking. So we're gonna dive into how heartbreaking it was, but it was nice. The bartender is he was like, I got 2 more TVs, one so I can watch and another one so more people can watch. I'm like, I love this place.
We will 100% be back. For sure.
Oh,
definitely.
Okay, let's talk about, like, before we dive in, let's talk about what other bullshit happened. Well, not all it's bullshit, but let's talk about what other crap happened last week during the week. I think we first need to take it back. We need to run it back to April 12th, Katie, to Max Verstappen's comment when asked if he thought that he could challenge for the title. He said it's a long season at this stage. I think we need
It's
45
chaos.
It's a different type of Sunday scary.
It's your
What is
newest
Max saying
obsession.
about that
It's
today?
Dirty Driving,
Max
a
is
Formula
like,
One podcast.
maybe I
We're the
won't
Hornsby
need all
sisters.
45 races.
I'm Katie.
I think,
And I'm Megan.
and I know we're going to get into this a little later, but Max still has the power. I'm wearing my Max Verstappen shirt today. I'm leaning more towards the Charles Leclerc championship win, but I still think Max has all the options and all the ability, as long as the car stays reliable, to fight for this championship.
I don't know. I think Max is like, okay, maybe not 45.
Yeah.
Maybe 38.
We'll see. We move on.
We move on.
Okay. Great. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I was going to say, additionally, last week, we also had Carlos Sainz extending his contract to 2 years. So he will be with Ferrari until the end of 2024. Great moment for Carlos Sainz, but in a not so great moment last week, Charles Leclerc he probably has many of these watches, but he had one of his prize, like Richard Millier watches stolen. I think it was $320K. And rumors have it it's like a special edition Charles Leclerc watch. And he had stolen by a group of fans that he actually stopped to take photos with, and then they sniped his watch off of his wrist. So they can go fuck themselves. It's pretty awful.
Yeah. Shitty news. Just why? At the end of the day, that's all I've got for them is, why would you ever do that? Because it's...
But then you had Charles Leclerc like straight up trolling everybody on Instagram. Like on Monday, I didn't have an Easter egg hunt. I had a hunt for a watch, and I was like, okay, Charles.
And after the opening 4 races, all 10 teams have now scored, which has not happened since the 2018 season. So Megan is well on her way to getting her prediction correct that all 20 drivers are going to score. I don't know about Nicholas Latifi, but we still have plenty of time to go. So, welcome back to Go ahead.
Technically, I only need 2 more drivers. I need Schumacher and Latifi, and then my prediction has come true. So it's been a good week. It's not been a good week, honestly. I'm lying. It's been a rough one. It was an interesting weekend, but I'm getting closer. Also, Nico Hülkenberg doesn't count, so don't even come at me.
All right, so everyone, welcome back to another episode of Dirty Driving. We were back in Imola, Italy for round 4 of the 2022 season. It was the first European race, the home race for AlphaTauri, and I'm calling this a new classic race because it's old style, it's classic style, but it's new, and we're adjusting to it as we have been in the past couple of years, and we're still adjusting to it now. We've actually been racing here just since 2020 in the new light, but the first race took back in 1980, and they raced up until 2006, and that's when we lost the contract, and we didn't race for a while there.
Additionally, this weekend was the first of 3 sprint races for 2022. Sprint races are 100-kilometer all-out sprints to determine the starting grid on Sunday. There are some changes to sprint races this year, and I think we're all pretty happy with some of them. Last year, the top 3 drivers received points. This year, it was actually the top 8 drivers that received points. So P1 took 8, and then it was a sliding scale down to P8, which took 1 point. K-Mag, ooh, ooh, woo, great moment for me. The honor of pole position is still actually awarded to the driver that goes fastest in qualifying on Friday instead of the sprint winner. Makes some sense. Not really when you think about what the name pole position actually means, but in terms of statistics and for like the record books, pole position is awarded to the fastest driver on Friday. Last year, the sprint races felt like little like mini battles between Max and Lewis. This year, it really feels like it's a race that all drivers can participate in. And I fully 100% believe that this race in Imola, the sprint in Imola, was proof that the 2022 cars provide just more excitement beyond watching Max and Lewis drive off into the sunset competing 20 seconds ahead of everybody. I mean, Max did that a little bit in the race, but everything else behind him was still interesting. So I think the sprint was good. I think the addition of points for more positions was good. But I do have a question for Katie about the sprints going forward later that we'll get into.
All right, so Ferrari were the favorites going into the weekend, with Charles Leclerc having such a phenomenal start to the season. And Ferrari's home base of Maranello is actually relatively close to Imola, so we had tons of Tifosi out, ready to see the victory. However, the energy of the weekend completely switched to Red Bull after Max Verstappen took pole and won the sprint.
So like I was saying, the format for a sprint weekend is a little different. We just have two practice sessions. Those two practice sessions, the first one on Friday is really important to get your shit together to race on a track, especially for a rookie like Zhao, who hasn't had the time or really put in any laps on Imola. I don't think he ever did in any of the lower races. I'd have to confirm that and double check that. But then you have qualies on the afternoon of Fridays, and then you have another practice session on Saturday before the sprint. On Saturday, the practice session on Saturday morning was a lot more important for this sprint than I think they will be on like a normal, non-rainy, just a dry conditioned weekend, because that Saturday morning practice was the first time that the drivers got a feel for what the new cars would be like on a dry Imola track. Before we kind of dive into all the nitty gritty of those 4 sessions before Sunday, I think I'm going to take a step back here, and Katie, jump in at any point to give your thoughts. Let's run through a couple of the upgrades, because we're kind of in the middle of this like development push. We've been hearing a lot about it, and now we're starting to see the beginnings of packages starting to come together and performance really starting to change for some teams. So every team but Ferrari brought upgrades this weekend. Ferrari had planned to bring a new floor, but after they had the drivers in the simulator, it indicated that they would be competitive without it. So they decided to forego bringing the new floor to Imola, and it looks like we're going to see it in Miami or Barcelona. There is talks that Charles Leclerc will take his new power unit in Barcelona. That will be his first one. Carlos Sainz is on like 2 or 3 because of his DNFs and his crashes and his kerfuffling himself. But like I said, the 9 other constructors did bring upgrades. I'm not going to go through all of them. I'm just going to highlight 3 teams, which I think are kind of important for what we're talking about today. The first one is Mercedes. They brought a new leading edge for side cooling. They brought new mirrors and supports for those mirrors for aerodynamics, and they brought a new rear floor. Alpine also brought a new floor. Ocon ran the old floor. Alonso ran the new floor. We all saw what happened hopefully all of us saw what happened to Fernando Alonso's side pod in the race on Sunday. So I'm not sure if they got all of the data they needed to really assess that new floor in a Grand Prix, but they did have the previous sessions to use in their data to determine what they needed to do going forward. Question marks on, I haven't dug into it to see, do I think that was a good move or not on their part? And finally, Red Bull. I definitely think these Red Bull upgrades were a key part in their competitiveness and their performance this weekend. Red Bull brought new winglets on the leading edge of their floor, which, interesting to note here, those winglets on the leading edge of the floor were actually something that Ferrari noticed, and they noticed it on the Aston Martin way back in the livery reveals back in February. So Ferrari noticed it on an Aston Martin in that video. Then Ferrari brought it to Bahrain, and now Red Bull has copied it. So it's kind of hilarious to me in a weird way that Ferrari and Red Bull are copying Aston Martin, which until this weekend had 0 points. Kind of interesting, but it's working out for them. Okay. Anything that you wanted to add on
No, I
upgrades?
think you definitely covered it, but I would agree that taking ideas from Aston Martin, who clearly has not been performing well this year, is shocking. It's kind of mind-blowing in a little bit.
When I discovered that nugget, I had to pause, take a second, and then reread it again. Like, woo, that's a skirt turn of events in that article that I didn't see coming. I was like, well, I would have put money. It was a lot of other teams, and I did not think they were going to say Aston Martin. Okay, let's talk Friday. FP1. It was rainy. And let me tell you, if there's one thing that I learned in this practice session, Katie, is to stay off the white lines and definitely stay off the green paint. Stay away from the curbs, because if you hit either, you're in the gravel. Quite a few drivers learned that lesson. We knew that the gravel was going to be an issue at Imola. It's an old school track that has those gravel. I call them the gravel traps. I don't know if that's the official name, but I felt like every time a driver went into them, they were just trapped in them. It was
There's
quicksand.
no getting out.
They're just they're stuck in them. They cannot go anywhere. Norris beached himself and brought out a red flag. But what the trip to the gravel that I thought was the most interesting was Valtteri Bottas's. And jump in here if you have any thoughts on this, because so he spins, he hits the curb. He didn't stay off the curb, even though literally the announcers are like, and they're on the white line, into the gravel they go. It's this just keeps happening. But he's into the gravel. He spins in the gravel, works his way up towards the barrier, and he just lightly kisses the wall, kisses the barrier, really no front wing damage. But it wasn't because he had stopped for any other reason than the floor had gotten stuck on the little tuft of grass. And so I was these $1 million vehicles have just been thwarted by this tuft of grass that now Valtteri cannot get off of. I don't know, in my head, and maybe it's not really that funny, but watching it play out and him just kiss the wall.
It was very
graceful.
It looked very oh, I'm just going to nudge you just a little bit, let you know that I'm there, and then continue on with my way. And that beached. And then the car kind of I don't really know if it did this, but in my brain it kind of teetered, but I don't think it really teetered. I think it just juddled as it came to a stop. And so in my head, I'm and it's stuck. The RV with Robin Williams, on the top of the mountain. It's just stuck. I don't really know if that's how it actually happened, but in my brain, that's how I've decided it. Whatever. Charles Leclerc was fastest on Inters, followed by Carlos Sainz Verstappen, and then the pair of Haas's. That afternoon, we had qualies, and the session so the weather was better than the morning practice, but this qualifying session broke some records, and not in the kind of way that's yay, cool, awesome, this was a great qualifying session. It had the most red flags in a qualifying session ever. So let's run through them. Q1, Alex Albon, right rear brake on fire, then explodes, sprays debris everywhere. Absolutely insane. What's more insane is it's same rear brake that we had to have firefighter Latifi come out in Bahrain. So
interesting that it was the same tire. Also watching that brake explode.
Yeah.
I was I didn't
and
actually know
I can't remember who it was,
that.
but at the beginning of the race, one of the drivers that would have been behind him said, it looks like the Williams brakes are on fire or about to catch fire. So somehow he made it through the whole race with no issues.
No, I think that was Latifi talking about Gasly.
Okay. Maybe.
Wasn't it?
I thought it was about a Williams, but
Was
I
it?
could be wrong. I could be recalling that incorrect.
We'll check that out. We'll clarify. Or maybe I'm remembering it wrong. I don't know. Okay, let's get into Q2. Q2, Carlos Sainz. Utter despair. Carlos Sainz lost the rear on his flying lap after his race engineer called over the radio to say that you have one lap before the rain starts. He took it too fast and lost the rears into the wall after the final turn for the second red flag of the session. Unfortunately, the remaining drivers would not get to come out until it started raining again. And the Mercedes wouldn't come out again for all of Q2. So they would not make it to Q3 at all. Q3, we saw K-Mag into the gravel. He touched the white line. He didn't learn for red flag number 3. Then we had Valtteri Bottas, red flag number 4. And then finally, Lando Norris into the wall for red flag number 5, who brought the session to an end and secured his place to start third for the sprint, preventing anyone from improving their time. Katie, I'm not going to let you talk about it here because we're going to talk about it later. Just going to leave that statement there and move on. There's other notable moments here. Like I said, neither Mercedes made it out of Q3. Neither Mercedes made it to Q3. Hell, they barely made it out of Q1. And if you did not watch Q1, go back, stop watching or stop listening to us. Immediately pull out your computer if you don't already have it out, or your cell phone. This isn't the 1900s. You all have cell phones. And watch the last 2 minutes of Q1. How stressed were you?
Very. It's every time I think I can't get more stressed, I get more stressed. Every time I think I've reached
sport is
peak
giving me
anxiety
gray hairs.
from Formula One, something else maxes it out.
Well, this weekend, I think what maxed it out was the fact that at one point, neither Lewis nor Russell were going to make it out of Q1. And I was like, what the hell is Toto going to do? Is Toto going to be okay? Because I didn't think he was going to be okay. Ultimately, Max Verstappen would take pole position and start P1 for the sprint race next to Charles. Saturday morning came around. Like I said, that this practice session was probably more important than most practice sessions that are on Saturday morning between a qualifying and a sprint, because you can't really make any setup changes. This one was important because they all needed to figure out how to drive on a dry track at Emilia in the 2022 cars. Russell went fastest, notable to mention, but really not notable beyond that because the majority of the drivers were just trying to get a feel for the track. Didn't really mean anything, unfortunately. Valtteri Bottas didn't make it out on track at all. Something to note. So his performance in the sprint is actually his impressive performance is only compounded by the fact that he literally didn't practice on Imola and dry tires or on his fixed car. So interesting to note there. And Lando Norris goes out right at the end in under, I think it was 6 minutes to set the last time. To get a feel for it after his car was being worked on for the majority of the morning. Okay, now it's time for the sprint race. Katie and I actually got to watch this together. It was nice at a coffee shop.
We had crepes
with a crepe.
And sat on the same side of the table like weirdos and watched the sprint race together.
Did you see the very sweet older gentleman at the table who just kept watching us? Like, what are those two girls? Well, first off, why do they have so many stickers on their laptop? And second off, why are they sitting next to each other watching a computer and not speaking to one another?
AirPods in.
Part of me wanted to be like, I was like, sir, it's Saturday morning. We have to watch the cars go vroom vroom.
How do you not know that?
Very busy. Very busy. Why aren't you watching? Would you like to? We should have invited them. Next time. Okay. Here we go. Sprint race time. Max Verstappen won.
Yes, he did.
Verstappen won. Charles Leclerc was in P2. P3 went to Sergio Perez. And Carlos Sainz was in P4 after a wild ride that he took, going from P10 after that disaster in qualifying. He made up six positions. It was pretty impressive. Let's get through the rundown real quick. I know it's so weird that we have to run down 2 races in a race recap. It's just a lot. I normally don't do this part. Okay, here we go. Into turn 1, Charles Leclerc led Max Verstappen, and let me tell you, you could hear that home crowd, which really isn't their home crowd, but the Tifosi were wild in. You could hear it through the TV. But it's not a wet race without a freaking accident right after the start of it. Like, bleh. We had a yellow flag when Zhao and Gasly made contact. Zhao would be out of the race. Ultimately, it'd be called a racing incident. Even the rookie really could have just given him some room. Pierre Gasly, that is. Gasly has to pit for a new front wing, and really that just, he was having a shit race to begin with. Neither him nor Yuki made it out of qualifying. So, but this was just the icing on the cake to really make his Saturday go from, or make his weekend go from like to worse. Tsunoda would be in a much better position. He made up 3 positions in the first laps, and Carlos Sainz made up 2. And man, he was flying through that field. I just, like, literally in my notes, it has like Carlos Sainz passed, Carlos Sainz passed, Carlos Sainz overtake, Carlos Sainz overtake. It was impressive to watch it and a little fun to get to cheer and be part of, like, and get to see the Tifosi get excited because you could hear them cheering in the crowd as well. We had 2 drivers, Kevin Magnussen and Alonso, receive black and white warning flags for weaving, which is multiple changes of direction. This is something that Stroll actually got a 5-second penalty for in Australia. And really, I'm not going to go in. We won't go down the rabbit hole today, but I think it's something that to note and keep an eye on for this season. Who's receiving actual second penalties for this and who's just getting warning flags. On lap 20, after Max Verstappen had stalked his 2022 championship rival, he took his opportunity to overtake and zipped home to victory in the sprint. What was really the best part about his victory, though, is that he was like, is that it? He had to ask his race engineer if it was over. And maybe that's because, like, 2 laps before that, he had been like, don't talk to me in the braking. So Max won. It was very clear that he was going to win when Charles Leclerc's tires were going off. After the sprint race, Charles made it very clear that if they have any chance, or were going to have any chance of being successful at challenging the Red Bull on Sunday, they were going to have to sort out the graining issue on the tires, which Charles suffered and Max did not, which ultimately led to the drop off in pace and Max being able to zip by him and take the victory. I mean, and once he had passed Charles, he was like 2 seconds down the road. Like, bye. The Paya Nation was happy to see Lando Norris finish P5 and Daniel Ricciardo finished P6. Haas grabbed the last sprint point. Magnussen was not too pleased with his decision to go on to the mediums, though, which he admits was his choice to start with the mediums. It's important to note here that Haas was the only team to start on mediums in the sprint race. Everyone else was on softs. Look, at the end of the day, sad for K-Mag that he was only in P8, but fucking so stoked for Haas that they had the best qualifying position in P4 ever, got to start the race in P4, and then got points in a sprint. Like, shit, last year, if you had heard me saying this, you would have been like, and she's an alternative universe and probably needs to come back to Earth.
It's so true.
And that was Friday, Saturday, and it was a lot. So I'm done talking.
It's so true. Like, I wrote down in my notes, like, unbelievable overtakes that happened during the race. Like, Schumacher around Vettel and then Albon around Hamilton. Like, sometimes when I'm writing these things down, I just am, like, in disbelief that they're happening.
Well, it's also like, if you had said these things last year, people would be like, what? No. If someone had told me last year that Max Verstappen had lapped Lewis Hamilton, I'd have been like, did Hamilton's engine break in half and he's still limping through the race?
Crazy. It's honestly
or did...
No, go ahead.
Sorry, go for it. Or I was going to say, so did Lewis Hamilton's engine break in half, or did like Red Bull put like NOS in it? And it's like four laps ahead. Like there's no in between.
God. All right, well, I'll jump into the race. It was lights out, and away we went on a wet, dry track. At the start of the race, Verstappen and Perez both had an incredible start. Charles was slow off the line and fell behind not only Sergio Perez, but also Lando Norris. So I was like kind of blown away watching that. I was like, oh, wait, what's happening to Charles? Hold on, wait a minute. And then I was freaking out.
She was freaking out. Point of clarification. She was
we're going to talk about this
out.
in a minute, but I bet big that Charles was going to win this weekend. And we obviously know now that he lost and I lost as well, but that's fine. Okay, so focus. Mick, I can't focus too hard on what I've done. Okay, so Mick tangled with Alonso, losing his 10th place start, and he ended up finishing the race 17th. George was up 5 places in the first lap, and he went on to finish 4th. He is now the only driver to finish in the top 5 of every race this season thus far. And then before we even got into, 10 seconds in, we had Carlos and Danny end up in the gravel. And it was messy. Danny Rick got ahead of Sainz and then lost the place back. And then Daniel kind of moved over to the right and ran into Sainz, causing Sainz to spin, and they kissed. Front of the car to front of the car. And Daniel was able to continue the race and get himself out of that gravel trap. But Carlos was beached and unable to do anything about it. Valtteri was in the tuffle a little bit. He got a little damage to the front right. And like I said, Carlos was out of the race did not finish. So big bummer for him. We were all heartbroken standing up at the bar. We went racing again in lap 5 with Verstappen, Perez, Norris, and Leclerc leading the pack. There was huge damage, as Megan mentioned earlier, for Fernando Alonso. His side pod literally seemed to like pop off and fly back behind him in the wind, which caused a retirement for him. Lap 17, Daniel made the first move to slicks, which caused the grid to follow suit as the track started to dry out. And Daniel Rick finished last, 18th, and apologized to Carlos Sainz for the incident. It was just ruled a racing incident without any fault necessarily going to Daniel, even though it was his. Then up in lap 18, Esteban Ocon had this unsafe pit release. We missed it, but we got to see the replay, and almost caused a nasty accident between him and Lewis Hamilton in the pit lane. It happens. It's a mistake. It's a silly mistake. It could have been way worse, but they did have a little touch moment. And I mean, like, that's the moment where like the anxiety is always peaking because they're in the little pit lane and they're bumped up next to each other, and like there's people standing there, and it just is like it makes me panic. So glad we didn't get to see it live, but saw the replay after and knew everyone was okay. And we saw some great overtakes. Like I was saying earlier, some of them were almost unbelievable. Valtteri drove a really clean race and took P5. He did have a long pit stop. He had some trouble with one of his tires, but he was able to, like I said, finish P5, and just a brilliant job by him. And then it's the best result for Alfa Romeo actually since Brazil 2019. So really showing up for the team this year. We had a battle between Yuki and Lance, who finished 7th and 10th respectively. And then Gasly was defending the shit out of Hamilton, who they ended the race in 12th and 13th. But I was really impressed by Gasly, especially after kind of having a shit weekend. He really held his own. Which brings us to lap 52 of the 63-lap race. And we can't get through a race without having a heartbreaking moment, and we already had one for Carlos, so I thought it was over with, but no, it got worse. It got way worse. So let me set the scene a little bit, because we thought we had a moment. So Megan's laughing at me. We thought we had a moment. we had Charles Leclerc behind Sergio, and Sergio made a mistake and ran through the grass, which gave Charles this opportunity to get within a second. And we were like, this is happening. Charles is making his comeback. He fumbled the bag. He fumbled the bag. He ran over one of the curbs, lost control of the vehicle, and ran into the barriers at the Alta corner. So I died. I think a piece of my soul died. I think it chipped off and broke off and whatever. He suffered damage to his front wing, had to pit, and lost out on third and dropped all the way down to ninth. He was able to recover just a little bit and finish sixth, so some decent points, but kind of fucked away 7 extra points that he could have had. Ruined my Sunday. That's like drastic. Like I had a great Sunday, but like he kind of ruined it. So this gave Lando Norris the podium position in third, his first podium of 2022, and a really nice mark of improvement for McLaren because I did not expect them to be on the podium at all this early on. Leaving Red Bull to take a double podium with Sergio Perez in second and Max Verstappen in first.
Which was their like first double podium since
2016.
like, 2016.
Yeah, it's insane
when it was Daniel and
insane
Max.
because I feel like they definitely would have had one last year, but they didn't. No,
they didn't. They really didn't. It blew my mind thinking about that, but also she was absolutely devastated. I can in fact confirm that she was heartbroken, and she only slightly resurrected when we got her a crown and hash brown.
I had a crown. Everyone asked me if it was my birthday. I said yes.
We lied and said yes. We thought it was going to help. I don't think it did.
It was bad. It was bad. So the only bet that ended up, I placed the most bets I've ever placed. I placed 10 whole bets. And the only one that hit for me was Sergio Perez on podium, which was honestly just like a fluke. I was like, yeah, sure, why not? The odds were great. Threw some bucks on it, took it. Like I said, I bet heavy on Charles Leclerc beating Max Verstappen, winning the race, taking fastest lap. None of that happened. I did try out a couple new bets that I was pretty excited about, like total classified cars at the end of the race, winning margin, and then there's an option to bet on both constructors and the points. So you win some, you lose some. And this weekend, I lost most of them.
Which, look, all I'm going to say is the weather people were just
they were wrong.
We spent the entire car ride down to the bar discussing and studying the weather report for the track because we were like, we're going to go, 15 drivers come home if it rains. We're going more drivers come home if it's more dry, less wet. And it was supposed to rain. All the teams kept saying it was going to rain as well. And it just didn't. So
I blame the meteorologists.
That's on you, Weather Channel. That's on the Weather Channel.
Yeah, it's not on us.
For not having a very accurate understanding of the weather in Imola. So hopefully the weather in Miami will be less hard for us to figure out.
Yeah.
I mean, what? It's hot and humid in Miami. It is what it is. In terms of fantasy, my comeback is coming. It's happening. It just begun. Katie has dropped down to second place with 3,735 points, and I've jumped to seventh place with 3,613 points. So that puts me at, if I do some really quick math here, at about 123 points behind Katie. Which
I made a mistake.
I told you. Well, she forgot to pick her star driver,
which would have been double points for one of my drivers. And well, Megan had this moment of panic right before the sprint race where she thought she hadn't set her team, and I was sitting there like, yes, but she did set her team. So
no, it was not before the sprint race. We were like,
yeah, that's actually right.
We were lap
It was already locked down.
And honestly, I have one more race with Carlos Sainz, and if that man doesn't perform, I don't know if I'll ever do this freaking fantasy shit again, because I bet a lot on him this year, and the last 2 races he has just let me down. Really, this weekend it was my boyfriend Danny Ricciardo that let me down. Great move of me though to take Valtteri as my talent driver though.
That was huge for you.
Huge move for him. He put up some great points this weekend. And he's ranked 5th in fantasy. 5th best driver.
It's not bad.
So he is making moves. No, I think he's really showed out. And let's be honest, the highlight of last night was me on the internet very late into the evening. I should have been well asleep. And I saw this graphic, or it wasn't really a meme. It was just like this person like talking about shit. And they were like, the championship fight that everyone cares about. And it's like Charles, Max, Sergio, George Russell, Carlos Sainz. And then it's like the championship I care about. And it's Valtteri's points versus Lewis's points. And I was like,
damn.
This is too much. And at that point I said, and the internet is done for the evening. Because they're separated by like, what, 4 points in this driver standings right now? Yeah, Hamilton's up by 4 points. Hamilton has 28 and Valtteri has 24. So I mean, for some people that is the title fight that they care about. For me, I'm watching the title fight between Valtteri and George Russell. Internally, that's my own 2022 championship.
I like that one a lot. You're not the only one with that one, but I like it.
Just some shits and gigs, like Toto. You make the right move here. You go too early. You go a year too early. I don't know. Okay, let's move on before we dive into this too far. So, Katie, we're kind of talking about it now. I think we just like solidify it and we talk about it holistically. Now that we're 4 races in, like, where are we in the title fight? Like, Max has won every race. Let me take that back. Max has won every race that he has finished. Wow, I made that blanket statement a little too quickly and rapidly. And that includes the sprint race, which he did finish and win. While Charles Leclerc has won the 2 other Grand Prix. So we have 2 and 2 on the Grand Prix, technically. The sprint race in there as well. We had back-to-back Grand Slams.
You stole
However, this is the first time in F1 history. This is the first time in Sorry, gotta be quicker. Moving on, let me complete my statement. This is the first time in F1 history that we have gone back-to-back with Grand Slams for 2 different constructors and 2 different drivers. So, I mean, the 2020 cars or 2022 cars are working. They're making the year spicier. I'll be honest, maybe it was me who jinxed the Charles Leclerc victory. I was like, wow, I really don't want him to run away with this in like the first 8 races. So maybe that's on me that Max won. Max Verstappen, you're welcome.
Yeah, I think this title fight is up for grabs, honestly. Completely up for grabs. Not sure who's going to take it. Very impressive that we've had 2 back-to-back Grand Slams. That's like another mind-blowing thing. But I'm not sure if they're the only 2 that could potentially be in the running for this. We've got a lot more season to go and a lot more development war to go, and who knows who's going to slip and fall.
I mean, like, realistically, like, we kind of mentioned that, like, Charles has 86 points, Max has 59, Sergio's at 54, George is at 49. But, I mean, like, Carlos Sainz is at 38 and Lando Norris is at 35. Like, we're nowhere near too far into the season where really, realistically, mathematically speaking, Carlos Sainz could pull this thing off.
And I mean, like, it could come down to any number of things. It could come down to confidence. It could come down to the car. It could come down to development. It can come down to I've DNF'd the last 4 races because of crashes or because of, again, the vehicle. There's just so much time left that I can't even begin to think about who it might be.
No. And what's interesting is, everyone's bemoaning Carlos Sainz for having 2 DNFs. So does Max Verstappen. So Carlos Sainz puts in a couple of really solid weekends. He could be leading.
Right.
So it's way too early to be like, oh, this person's for sure. And I don't think anybody is, but I even kind of don't like the rhetoric that, like right now, the title, the most likely to be the champion this year is Charles Leclerc. Like, what the fuck? We are 3 races in.
Yeah.
Like,
how do you know that unless you know something I don't know? And I mean, like, George has finished top 5 the last 4 races. Only driver to do that. I'm going to say that again because it's very impressive in the car he's driving. And he's at 49 points. He's 10 points behind Max.
he's literally in a car that both Lewis and Toto have called undrivable, and yet has been in the top 5 for the last 4 races. Granted, I think that is just like maximizing circumstances. It is also, though, him really getting an undrivable car to make overtakes. I mean, George Russell was overtaking, and Lewis Hamilton could not get around Pierre Gasly.
Yeah. And is it confidence? I did not see Lewis Hamilton this weekend. That's all I've got to say.
I mean, the car could also just not be not be in the place that Lewis wants it to be in for him to be successful, because they do have different driving styles. Everybody does. Also, I mean, I think it's Toto. Let me refresh myself. But Toto was literally like, sorry for what you had to drive here today. And then he literally said later, sorry for what you had to drive here today on the radio. And then in the press conferences afterwards, he's like, I think we can make a step and bring developments to the car, which will fix the bouncing for Miami. Like, this is going to be a statement. Maybe you should mark the time and the date. I completely agree with the statement that Nico Rosberg made, where he said that it is, in fact, Toto Wolff, of all people, who could lead this team out of this shit box that they're in right now. So I'm still not counting them out. Everyone's like, they're out. Lewis is even saying, I'm out of the championship. I'm still not. Like, I don't think Lewis is going to win the title this year, but like, I could still see him in like 3rd.
Yeah.
Hell, maybe George Russell will win it. That would be the prediction of a lifetime if I made that prediction. I might put some money on that.
Why not? $10?
$10? I mean, what do you make if you put $10 on it? Like, probably like a couple grand now.
I'll get back to you on that one. I'll take a look right now. Let me ask you this question, and then I'll take a look. So you kind of just brought it up, but post-race, Lewis Hamilton conceded that I am out of the championship for sure. There's no question about that, but I'll keep working as hard as I can to try and pull it back together somehow. What are your thoughts about this? Coming from a 7-time world championship, and kind of a 2-part question. What do you think about Lewis compared to George Russell? I know you touched on it a little bit, but give us your thoughts.
I mean, I think it's impressive. George Russell is the master of the Mercedes shitbox right now, and it's kind of fun to watch. Like, I mean, it's kind of cool to watch him perform in a shitter. I keep saying that word today. I don't know if that's just like my word of the day. Again, though, I mean, I feel like Lewis's statement here is a little bit like Max's, like, we need 45 races to win this championship, and then here we are. So, and I know that Red Bull and Mercedes are in a different place in terms of the development of their car. You know, Red Bull was way ahead of Mercedes when Max said that, just like a egregiously stupid statement, I'm going to just point out there. But I mean, maybe this isn't Lewis's year. Like, this isn't the year he wins his 8th. Maybe it's next year. Maybe Mercedes is able to get the development under control. But if there's anybody who can do it, it's going to be a team led by Toto Wolff. And I truthfully, I do not think that Mercedes will survive another weekend like this. So they are just not going to have another weekend like this. And people might say that's blind confidence in the Mercedes machine. No, that is just understanding that the Mercedes machine will not fail.
Yeah.
Yet. Like, I'm sorry, they haven't run out yet. Like, it's not over. It's not. I mean, clearly isn't, because George Russell is still showing performance. And this weekend he showed it. Hell, it isn't just him being able to drive a horrible car. Like, he held off Valtteri at the end of that race at a duel. He like kept his cool. They were fighting for 4th. Like, he really kept it clean. He kept it smart. He didn't get stupid with it. He was succinct and really, I mean, at one point I was like, is George Russell going to be my winner of the weekend? Because of that last little performance where he capitalized. He completely capitalized at the end. And, well, he capitalized in the race, but then he really, really capitalized at the end and was smart in that battle with Valtteri. I mean, I think there's also a little bit to say here that, like, he did get a little lucky in the beginning and played the start of the race really smart. That put him in a position. He gained quite a few positions in the beginning, and that put him into a position at the end of the race where he could capitalize on, just having the track position in front of Valtteri and essentially just like not losing. That was do not lose, but that was still him holding it together in order to not lose.
Mercedes is still in it. There's still time, and you're completely right. George is making the moves that he needs to make to get the results that he wants.
We'll see what happens. I'm interested. I think I will have more to say and more understanding of of Mercedes after they bring a set of upgrades, like a full set of upgrades, whether that's at Mercedes or they do and decide to wait till Barcelona.
Yeah. Do you have a question for me?
Oh, it's my turn. Okay. So do you want to stick in the race and do some other questions about the race, or do you want to hop back to like the stuff from Friday and Saturday?
Let's stick race first and then hop back maybe.
Because my questions are about Friday and Saturday. So if you have a race question, you might want to jump into that first.
So a couple people asked us this at the bar, and so I thought it would be a great thing to bring up on the podcast. But why did the FIA not fault Daniel Ricciardo with causing an incident, and why was it just a racing incident? And I know that's kind of like we don't have the specific answers for that, but let's just kind of talk about it a little.
So ultimately, in watching the last couple of years, what I've noticed is that the stewards don't often penalize things that happen on lap 1 or 2. The entire pack is bunched up together. Sometimes there are 3 cars going into a turn where it can only really, like, one really should go in. Like 3 wide when only one should go is not going to work out. Here's the deal. I was doing a little bit of research about Daniel Ricciardo, the whole incident after the race. Ultimately, Daniel Ricciardo hit the curb. He thought he had been hit when he hit the curb, is what he said. He slipped off the curb, kind of lost it, and went into Sainz. Yeah, it's awful and unfortunate that it ruined Carlos Sainz's race. Like, sucks for Carlos. But it's a racing incident, and it doesn't surprise me that they didn't penalize him at all, even though, yes, technically he slipped off the curb, he ran into Sainz, he spun Sainz around and ruined his race. But it was the first lap in dry, wet conditions on tires that just were not at temperature. I mean, I don't know that for sure, but I can pretty much tell you that there's no way they were, because all weekend they had been talking about every time that it had been like a wet session, the tire blankets had come off and the temperature of tires plummeted. And then the drivers were pushing to get their tires up to temperature. They sat on the grid in the cool, damp temperatures, started the race. So tires are cold. It's dry, wet condition. They're on inters. They're all bunched up together. Spray is everywhere. He thought he got hit. He slipped off the curb. It was a racing incident. It's unfortunate. It's a racing incident. It doesn't surprise me that the stewards didn't do anything about it. People were pissed that the stewards didn't do anything about it, but like, if that had been Latifi and Alba, or like Latifi and Schumacher, or I don't know, that had been Sonoda and Albon, no one would have been like, get the stewards in there and give him a penalty. The only reason people were like, Daniel Ricciardo should be sent to the stewards is because it was Carlos Sainz. And we all wanted Ferrari to do all this weekend.
Yeah. It's just one of those things that happens when two very skilled drivers are going hundreds of miles an hour and trying to take each other over and other cars over on circuits that are designed for people going in a single file line. So things are bound to happen. And I think it would have been ridiculous if the stewards had gone into an investigation and B, penalized him for that, when there are things that have happened that are far worse that should have been penalized. And more people would have been in an uproar about Daniel getting penalized for that than they would have been for nothing happening. Because
again, if it had been two shit cars, back of the grid cars, right, no one would have cared. In fact, the only reason people would have been pissed is because there would have been a safety car. And DRS wouldn't have been enabled till later. But anyway, it wasn't enabled till later anyway because of the wet conditions. So it kind of surprises me that people, let me take that back. I loved that people were like talking about it and trying to understand it. I did not like that. I'm not talking about the people that we were with. I'm talking about, a couple of things I saw online that people thought because it had been Sainz and they had been hoping for Sainz to have a win, that that made the situation different. No, all incidents on track are evaluated in terms of what happened, not
who it happened to
was involved.
Exactly. And that's how it should remain.
I mean, that's how it should remain, which is also kind of crazy, which goes back to what I was saying about the black and white flags for weaving, is that I'm going to start paying a lot of attention to when warnings happen and when penalties happen.
We are keeping a close eye on how the new race directors and the FIA are managing what's going on this year.
Hey, we got through a weekend without talking about fire-resistant underwear and jewelry.
Amen.
So we're moving up. I mean, there are some pictures that kind of hint that Max Verstappen does have a nipple piercing. If you would like them, let me know. I have one.
Oh, boy.
I screenshotted it. This girl was like debunking it. I'm convinced it's true. I don't know why this changes. In fact, I think I might like it more now. I don't know if he has this.
I don't know if it hurts or helps right now. I can't decide. I need to sleep on that one.
Oh God. Okay. Let's go back to Friday. I'm going to take our questions back to Friday. So Lando Norris took his little trip to the gravel. It wasn't a beach. It was a gravelly beach. And beached himself and brought out the red flag to end Q3. preventing any of the other drivers from improving their times. Not that really thought any of them were going to be able to best Verstappen's time, but it's the principle. It was not as severe as the Leclerc crash into the wall in Monaco last year that prevented Max Verstappen from setting a time that would be competitive, or really the Nico Rosberg lockup in 2014 that prevented Lewis Hamilton from setting a fast time. But this is something that the announcers mentioned that I wanted to ask you about, because I know that you were watching this session late, so I don't know if you heard this part, but I wanted to mention it here to talk about, and also I kind of wanted to like see what everybody else kind of thought. So if you have thoughts on this, send us a message, because I'm interested in what you have to think. But should Formula One consider or have a rule like IndyCar that would leave a driver who causes a red flag in a qualifying session to have their times deleted and not be able to advance into a future, or like into a further session or the next session? So if you cause a red flag in Q1, you can't go to Q2. You cause one in Q2, you can't go to Q3. Thoughts, Katie?
Okay. So initially, right off the bat, my thought is that when this happens, normally the driver deals with consequences and punishment in the worst form. In the idea of Monaco last year with Charles, he was unable to start the race. So, like, that's the punishment. What happened on Saturday with Sainz? Had he not crashed in qualifying, he probably could have been able to do better in the sprint and perform better than Perez and have a better slot on the grid come Sunday. So that's my like initial reaction to it, is I feel like the driver gets punished in one way or another for making the mistake in qualifying. But other drivers also get punished from their mistake. And so I don't know if I don't know. I struggle with this one because it's been like this for so long. There has not been that rule. So do I think that the FIA would ever come in and implement that rule? Probably not. Should it be implemented? Maybe, because I feel like that would keep drivers from having those mistakes or being a little bit more cautious. But at the end of the day, mistakes happen, and we can't always prevent them from happening. They can't always prevent them from happening. So I don't know if they always deserve to be punished in the idea of not being able to continue. Now, I will say, sorry, I'm kind of all over the place with this one, but I will say Carlos was able to go into Q3 and continue, but he couldn't because of the damage. So why did you give him his spot when he couldn't even get back out on track? That's like the
So I think that
piece to it that is like, if you're able to continue, then you should be allowed to continue. If you're not able to continue, then maybe your times get deleted.
I don't know. I feel like, so essentially the rule, like, let's look at the Carlos Sainz situation. He caused a red flag in Q2. So he would have had his times deleted for Q2. So he would have started 15th instead of 10th. He would have never advanced to Q3. I mean, like, my only issue is that there was a chance that Charles was going to start the race at Monaco from pole position after he prevented the potential of Max Verstappen putting up a better time than him. So there is this like sliver of, well, you know, maybe the drivers do end up getting punished for their mistake, but is that enough to justify, or like, is there like punishment in the weekend because of their mistake enough to cover the fact that they have like potentially ruined other drivers' ability to improve times. And I think that's why IndyCar has the rule. I have the rule up actually. And so basically the whole point of it is that like if a car causes a red flag condition or a red condition in any of the segment, the car's 2 best lap times of that segment shall be disallowed. So I think that there could be like an argument to be made that, either, and maybe Formula One will probably never have this, but I think it's an interesting conversation that Formula One could go to deleting just like your best time. So you don't have the best time. You still have a time if you've set 2. If you didn't set if you haven't set 2, then you have no time, and it is what it is. But I do definitely think that you shouldn't be able to advance to the next segment. Whether or not you have 2 best times or 1 best time deleted, that kind of to me is a little bit semantics, and you'd have to look at probably a lot of historical data. And you would have to look at only the historical data from since we brought into the knockout idea of qualifying. But I'm kind of like, it was messed up that Lando Norris caused the red flag that ended Q3. No driver could even improve their time. Not that anyone was going to best Verstappen, but they could have moved up 2 or 3 positions. And then Lando Norris gets to start in P3. Like, to me, that's like, that's where it's like a little bit like.
Yeah, there's gray. There's a lot of gray, I feel like, with this. And I feel like in IndyCar, there is no gray because they've made the black and white rule. And in Formula One,
go
ahead.
F1 could just make it black and white.
Could. For sure. I just don't know. I'd be interested to see what the driver's take on this would be. I'd love to hear their opinions on this because I could see them going either way with this. And I'd also love to hear more about what the IndyCar drivers have to say about this. So I'll have to do a little bit more research on this one.
I have a feeling that every driver would say it situationally. Like Charles Leclerc would be like, don't add it. He likes to Leclerc himself. Where Max Verstappen would be like, add it.
I've been
burned by this before. So I think it's all based on like the driver's perspective. I don't know. I think it's something interesting. If anyone has maybe we should put it up on the story and see what people think. But if anyone has any really strong thoughts on it, let us know. I'd be interested in getting your thoughts. Okay, my second question for you, Katie, is, so it was our first sprint of the year. It came with more reward for the top 8 drivers. Both Charles and Carlos are leading constructor drivers, mentioned in press conferences that they would like to keep the sprints, but have them not impact Sunday's race. So the qualifying results from Friday would still hold up as the race starting grid, but there would be that Saturday sprint standout race that was completely isolated from Friday and Saturday's qualifying race grid. What are your thoughts on that? Just having a completely independent sprint.
I'm all for it. Because I thought I've got something more to say. Don't worry. I'm all for it because we only have 3 sprint races. So hear me out. I think if we had gone for 8 sprint races this year, it would have made more sense for the setup how it is because they're more frequent. They have more add to the season. There's more time for drivers to improve in their sprint races. There's just more. It makes more sense. It feels like it's been thought out. This does not feel like it has been thought out. The pole position gets to stay, but we're going to focus, but the grid is the lineup of the sprint. Instead, I would really like to see qualies determine where you start in the sprint and where you start in the race. And the sprint is a standalone. Here are some extra points for you if you do well. So it's the same. It's the same start, dependent on qualies.
That's interesting.
And I think that would be a very interesting thing to then compare, especially if now again, I think if they keep it where there's only 3, I think this would make sense. If there's more, like 8, 9, 10, who knows, eventually it could be every weekend, then it makes more sense the way that they're doing this. But since we're still in this like testing stage of figuring out if we like sprints or if we don't like sprints, I would be intrigued to see the comparison of where the drivers finish in just 100 kilometers with the same start and where the drivers finish after, however many laps, 60 to 50 to 70 laps of racing that they are.
That's interesting. I hadn't really thought about that. Because I think the only part about doing the sprint as an isolated race that I don't like is that, like, how would you decide the starting grid? I would want a different starting grid than what's going to happen on Sunday. Like, I want to see something different in lap 1 than I'm going to see. That was the only thing that kind of annoyed me about this weekend is I was like, and the same front row. But, I mean, it was exciting.
Which brings us... Yeah.
We all got bored last year.
Which brings us to the bigger question of, should we even have sprints?
Oh, I for sure want them. Maybe we have the starting grid be like the results after Q1, like chaotic.
Now that would be something.
Like you have to put
if the sprint. Yeah, if the
forces...
sprint was the Q1, yeah, that would actually be
just to force people to put up good times in Q1. Not times to just get them out of the bottom 5, but you have to put up a representative time so that you are not screwed for the standout race on Saturday.
Do wonders in getting people out in Q1 early on and seeing more action in qualies.
I also think that if it's going to be its own standout race, it needs to be worth more points. If you're going to make it a standout race and have only 3 in a year, it needs to be worth more. I think they did take a step forward by making it worth more points. But, if it's going to be this is independent of what happens on Sunday, then maybe first place is 12.
Yeah.
14. It's a half of what a normal race is worth or something. I don't know. But if it is not going to have any ties to what happens on Sunday, then it needs to be worth more. Ross Brawn, though, in the interview we watched before the race, which I don't think happened that wasn't live, he did mention that, it's clear that the sprints are successful. It was exciting. It got people to watch on Friday. It made the first practice session interesting because that was the only practice session before a legitimate session that has meaning. Not that all sessions don't, but has weight attached to it. I do like that Friday has weight because Friday for a lot of people doesn't. Hell, Valtteri Bottas was I like getting into it. Friday seems kind of loosey-goosey.
Yeah. Which I do have, we kind of talked about this. I want to bring it up really quick. The conversation about how getting rid of Thursdays has now made Fridays even worse for the drivers.
Oh, yeah. Max had talked about that. Max had mentioned in the same press conference that made me have this whole spark of inspiration. So if you're interested, it is the first press conference. If you have F1 TV, it's the first press conference with Charles, Carlos, and Max. They were asked about the new weekend setup. So Carlos and Charles and Valtteri all kind of took it in, and so did George Russell. They all kind of took it about the sprints. Whereas Max was we got rid of Thursday, and what you did is you made a shorter race weekend, have Thursday and Friday be longer for the drivers. And he clarified, I'm actually really, and this is how I know that Max Verstappen has matured. He was we have to be at the track early. He's not that being there early is the problem. He knew in his head, oh, I'm going to be ripped to shreds if I don't go back and correct myself. But it just makes Thursday and Friday really, really long now that they've shoved all of the official weekend press into Friday. So Thursday is just long with meetings, more like team determined media. Activity is more shit going on at the track. So in fact, the weekend is no shorter.
Right. They never really got rid of Thursday. Like, the weekend still starts on Thursday. They just made schedules shitty for Friday. So I'll be interested to see if we ever see that switch back at some point.
I wouldn't be surprised.
All right, let's jump into our winners and losers. Megan, you want to start us off with your winner?
Yeah, I'm actually really excited about this. I took a really long time to determine my winner. I went through, at first it was Kevin Magnussen, then it was Valtteri, then it was George Russell, and finally I was like, hell no, I'm an idiot. It has to be Aston Martin. They had their first points of 2022 and really the kickoff to their 2022 season, in my opinion. And it wasn't just one driver, it was both drivers into the points. So they had a double points finish. They were the only team other than Red Bull to have both cars in the top 10, which when I thought about that, I was like, that's weird. Especially, well, and it makes sense when you think about it, because we lost a Ferrari and we lost a McLaren. And the Mercedes were the Mercedes. So, like I said, they were both in the top 10. Sebastian Vettel finished P8. Lance Stroll took that last final point in P10. It was a really, really strong race for both of them, and they had strong race pace on the wets. They had a good start, which was a massive key to their ability. And truthfully, Sebastian Vettel said it best when he said we maximized everything that we had. And we had a good strategy, and realistically, it was just kind of like things falling in line for them. They had a good strategy. They were smart with their timing of the pit stops. They had success in the cooler temperatures and the wet conditions. We know Lance Stroll likes them wet races. He likes the drizzle. And honestly, if you haven't, and this is where I fault the F1 race people, in charge of videography. Oh, I can't say words there. I couldn't figure out what you call them. I don't know what you call them. Are they the orchestrators of the replays and the content, the TV content? They really dropped the ball, because we never saw Lance Stroll work so hard to keep Lewis Hamilton behind him and to put pressure onto Yuki Tsunoda. We really didn't even see Yuki Tsunoda, who was also a candidate for my winner in this race. But it was a faultless drive for both of them. And that's something that Mike Crack, mentioned.
Love it.
Who's your winner?
It started with just Max, and then it expanded to Red Bull, which is what happened with my loser as well. But how could I not choose them? First one, too, in, forever, we said, 2016? And it's a double podium finish after the reliability woes that they've been experiencing, especially with Max. So they're my winners. Not only did Max take podium, but he took a Grand Slam, which is where I was going to insert the fact that this is the second Grand Slam in 2 races. That's never happened before. So again, that's pole, victory, fastest lap, and leading every single lap. In addition, he has now shrunk the distance to Charles Leclerc to just 27 points. And he also won I think I might butcher this, but the Laurentis Award, Sportsmanship Award, which has also been won by Michael Schumacher, Lewis Hamilton, the likes of sports. And so all around, I believe, just a great weekend for the team. Sergio Perez getting up there on podium, and specifically for Max Verstappen.
I mean, I think Sergio Perez said it best. He said, we've been so unlucky. It's just been such a difficult time. It's been such a difficult start. So yeah, they deserve to be a winner. My loser, and let me tell you, I had a couple of them. I went through a couple of names just like I went through a couple of my winner names, but ultimately I settled on Mick Schumacher. And this one was really hard for me to write. I am a huge Mick Schumacher fan. In fact, prior to me turning off my phone last night and prior to the whole, Valtteri Bottas Hamilton thing, I went down a rabbit hole of looking at Mick Schumacher. Really, because I was like, he had such a bad day today. Maybe I should buy something of his to make myself feel better about his bad day. But Mick Schumacher started P10, and really, I thought he was going to score points. In fact, I told Katie to put money on it. Sorry, my bad. That's all me. That was all me. I was like, put money on him and the points. I thought today was the day, and really, I should have just bet big on Aston Martin. But, we move on. Sunday was just awful for Mick. He spun twice. In the first lap, he got held up behind that Daniel and Carlos kerfuffle and dropped back to P17. Then we know that he had that contact with Alonso that ultimately resulted in Alonso losing a side pod that looked like Alonso's car had just had a giant bite taken out of the side of it, and was unable to continue. And then on lap 25, when he cut across the lawn, he did a little lawn mowing at the Alta corner. He spun getting back on the track. He ultimately finished P17, second to last in front of Danny Ricciardo. And really, it sounds stupid, but I had gotten used to the Haas's not being at the back of the grid. So it kind of broke my heart. It was weird. Weird choice and weird words for me to say that I got used to the Haas's not being in the back.
All right, my losers, maybe just me being spiteful, but it's Ferrari. I'm genuinely just kind of pissed off at both of them. Carlos, second race in a row, we're out. I feel bad for him too because he just announced the extension. You think you're going to come out and do so well after you get great news like that. Not necessarily all his fault, but it's 2 races in a row. He's actually only finished 1 lap in the last 2 Grand Prix, which is shocking to me after he had a 31 race finishing streak. So bad luck all around. Bad news bears, as we used to say. And then Charles, for obvious reasons, like I said, it started with Carlos and then it upgraded to Ferrari as a team because that last minute accident or that last minute run into the barriers really just screwed the team for the weekend. So he's still 1 win and a fastest lap ahead of Max Verstappen in the points, but all in all, they are my losers of the weekend. Poor showing.
Poor showing. Okay, let's get into our honorable mention. Our honorable mention this week is Yuki Tsunoda. Like I said, he was going to be my winner, so I decided to make him my honorable mention. AlphaTauri hadn't had the best weekend going into the race, even though it was their home weekend or their home race weekend. It was also kind of like Haas's one of their 4 home weekends, which I just think is hilarious that they just get to claim 4, but I digress. Both cars went out in Q1. Yuki made up positions in the sprint race where he started P16 and ended P12 to give himself a much better start in the race. Like I said, he started 12th in the race, and after the first 2 laps was already up to 10th. He drove a really strong race. And again, the TV videographers just missed a lot of his key moments, or at least I missed a lot of his key moments. I think we saw him in a lot of replays, truthfully. He overtook Stroll, K-Mag, Vettel to ultimately finish in 7th place. He brought home some key points for AlphaTauri at their home race in front of some key Scuderia people, which is, I think, a big deal considering, especially me and you, we kind of had this really negative view of Yuki after Drive to Survive and his laziness, but I think he has rallied, and he also, he was there to give the AlphaTauri fans something to celebrate. And I think now that they have the upgrades, they're going to fine-tune them for Miami. We're going to see some more performance out of AlphaTauri, and I definitely think that the car performance is really solid. So it's positive all around.
And for our hidden gem, I struggled picking this one, not because there are a lot of options, but because there weren't a ton of off-track news happenings this weekend. But I chose that Lewis Hamilton and his longtime friend Serena Williams are trying to get into the football game. So announcements were made that the two would be entering in a bid to purchase Arsenal, or correct? Chelsea. And Lewis opened up about it and said, ultimately, I'm a sporting fan. Chelsea is one of the biggest clubs in the world and one of the most successful. When I heard about this opportunity, I was like, wow, this is one of the greatest opportunities to be a part of something so great. And then obviously when anytime Lewis Hamilton is involved, it goes further than just sports. So I also wanted to add in that he said they've been quite leading in their work in diversity and inclusion and becoming more diverse and progressive. Our goal is to continue the work that they've done already and make an even bigger impact and engage more with the community. So little off-track news this weekend. Everyone was like concerned whether or not this was going to take Lewis's focus off of racing, and he said multiple times that, you know, his number one focus is still being a Formula One driver. So no need to worry on that front. He will be around in F1 for a while.
No need to worry at all. Literally at one point at Tres Equis, I guess it really was all of ESPN saw it. They had the Chelsea West Ham game side by side with the pre-race stuff. And I was like, look, clearly he is not going to be taken away. Chelsea's about to play. And what is he doing? He's going to the grid. So not worried about Lewis Hamilton at all. So excited for him and Serena. Honestly, I might become a Chelsea fan.
To.
Sorry, Michael Bizot.
Yeah, we need to get Michael's take on this. Michael's our editor, for those who don't know, but we definitely need to ask him what he thinks about this.
Maybe we need to bring him on next week for like a little like conversation piece
definitely.
about this. Michael, get ready. Okay, up next is another bye week before the traveling circus heads to America for the new Miami Grand Prix, which we just saw some sneak peek photos. I think we're going to be getting a lot of those photos in the next week and a half. And check out our episode next week. It'll be another team deep dive. We always love those.
Thank you so much for listening to another episode. Don't forget to subscribe and follow us at Dirty Driving Pod on Twitter and Instagram.
Until next time, stay dirty.